Hello, I'm your host, Annette Sorensen. Today, we will be discussing the Global Strategy Nexus, which will be held next month in Lagos, Nigeria. I have joining me here today Dr. Kokofu, the former Environmental Protection Agency Director of Ghana. We will be discussing how African countries can achieve economic growth while simultaneously protecting the environment. Dr. Kokofu, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. Could you start by giving us a brief introduction of yourself and your background in climate work?
Okay. Greetings from Ghana and Africa, of course. My name certainly is Dr. Henry Kwabena Kokofu, legal practitioner, and I'm an environmental scientist, majoring in climate advocacy and diplomacy. I have a long-standing commitment to environmental governance and sustainability or sustainable development. I am the former executive director of Ghana's Environmental Protection Authority and have played an enormous role in a key role in shaping environmental policies in the country. Currently, I serve as the CEO of Systems Envirotech and System Legal Consult, where I work on integrating environmental sustainability with technology and legal solutions. Additionally, I'm a politician as well, which I do not need to go into details for now. Yeah.
That's great.
I think that's a brief background about me. Yeah.
Thank you. So I wanted to start off.
I may also have to add that the University of Ghana, the Institute of Environment and Sanitation Studies have appointed me as a part-time lecturer to undertake environmental policy and law at the postgraduate level. So maybe that may be an important information for you to have.
Thank you. So I wanted to start off by asking about the current climate landscape in African countries. So how strong are current adaptation and protection mechanisms? What gaps need to be filled?
Well, Africa's current climate landscape has a vast level of grounding. The climate of Africa is a range of climates, such as the equatorial climate, the tropical wet and dry climate, the tropical monsoon climate, the semi-arid, that's semi-desert and steppe, the desert climate, that's hyper-arid and arid, the humid subtropical climate, and the subtropical highland climate. African nations are at a critical juncture when it comes to climate challenges. Despite contributing minimally to global greenhouse gas emissions, the continent faces disproportionate impacts from climate change. And these are all bare facts. I mean, they are hard truth that one cannot deny. And so we have desertification, high temperature rises, extreme weather events, like flooding and all those things, coupled with damages to agricultural products and all that. So loss and damage is very much felt in Africa, or by climate-induced catastrophe. So basically, the climate landscape is not the best for African countries, including my own Ghana, my own country.
And in their pursuit of economic growth, what are key climate considerations you believe that African nations must make?
Further to the earlier question, I think African countries, we've made some significant strides in climate adaptation, with policies focused on reforestation, renewable energy adoption, and water conservation. However, there are still major gaps, particularly in financing, infrastructure, and technological innovation. So these are add-on to the first question, advances. Access to climate funding remains a challenge. and many African nations lack the institutional framework necessary to implement large-scale environmental protection agenda. Strengthening climate resilience requires international partnerships, investment in green technologies, and a shift towards climate-smart agriculture and industries. The considerations so far as pursuing economic development have a range of activities, knowing that the economic development must be approached with sustainability at its core. So these are some of the considerations. And I must say, the environmental cushioness curve has derived from the economic cushioness curve that had been adopted over the years by the developing countries, particularly the global north. It's something that Africa is grappling with to meet with. Given the natural resource base of our economic development programs, raw materials, how to get them off the ground or wherever, by way of extraction, by way of whatever means, and then aligning it with, economic development and environmental governance system. So you can be sure that in our part of the world, the cushioness curve is a straight curve and does not bend, in order to ensure that we bring back the environment to its normalcy after exploiting the natural resource. And these are mainly due to corruption, mainly due to lack of proper technology, over-reliance on indigenous technologies, and also exploitation by international multinational companies who come along to, as it were, do business with us. So we are considering certain key areas. One is the renewable energy adoption. That's given the energy transition agenda. We in Africa hope to access clean energy sources such as solar, wind, and hydroelectric power. And again, there are challenges in here. The initial investment that are required to adapt to this green energy source is quite huge. And our economies are so fragile. The debt burdens are so huge on African countries. So it's difficult to get investment in these areas. The other one has to do with sustainable agriculture and land use. We intend implementing climate-smart agricultural practices to boost food security without depleting resources. And here, the adoption of agroforestry technologies and practices has multiple land use come in mind. And we're trying to have what we call agricultural meeting with forestry, where we can have the forest landscape well protected, managed, whilst we intercrop with food crops along the line. So food production vis-a-vis environmental protection through tree planting and other means of agricultural practice, including aquaculture, I've mentioned silviculture, pasture, and all those things. So that is one aspect. Industrial decarbonization. We are encouraging industries to reduce emissions and adopt circular economy models where reuse, recycling of resources are given prominence. It's a common knowledge now that waste, after all, are resources. So if we can, and we should be able to adopt these mechanisms in order to reduce the incidence of always going in to extract new raw materials from the ground or from the environment, the biophysical environment, in order to forestall damage. Industrial decarbonization as well also goes into vehicular emissions. We set standards for vehicular emissions, and it's yet to be fully implemented. And along with it has to come with emissions levy. The polluter pays principle must apply here. And another very, very difficult challenge that we have because the population are not prepared to pay additional levies on emissions as it may be. But we have no option than to go on that tangent. So the government of today is not interested to pursue the emission levy system. But by and large, I mean, the reality will dawn on government that globally that has been the practice. And if you have to reduce emissions, if you have to decarbonize industrialization, which the automobile industry is very much a component or an integral part, then we cannot run away from that. We're looking also at biodiversity protection and conservation to ensure that economic activities, especially in mining and urban expansion, do not lead to environmental degradation. This is also an area that we haven't done much well, because the more we're moving, the more economic activities become intense, the more we destroy diversity of plants and animals, water bodies. And we must be aware that Ghana is grappling with what we call gallant phase, that is small-scale illegal mining activities, that is seriously threatening our water bodies, destroying arable land, and also depleting the forest cover. That notwithstanding, we have measures in place trying to fight it out. But more serious, on the other hand, has to do with chemicals, pollution that has been resulting in health issues within the catchment areas of the mining communities. So it is not only biodiversity per se, it also borders on health issues as well. Well, I think for now, if I may pause here and then listen to the other person.
Thank you. This is a great overview of current adaptation mechanisms and gaps that need to be filled. For my next question, I wanted to ask about economic development. So how can economic development and also sustainability and climate protections be achieved simultaneously? Do you see this as a possible path?
Yes, it is possible. Like I said earlier on, the industrial world adopted the economic cushionary scale and applied it to the environmental cushionary scale. So now, for me, to say a nation is developed, then there is an equilibrium, a perfect balance between resource utilization, exploitation and utilization vis-a-vis environmental protection and environmental governance. The balance must be there. We are at a loss as we speak. But then we're trying to pursue certain policies and legal frameworks that will ensure creation of jobs whilst we preserve the environment. For example, investing in green infrastructure, building sustainable cities with efficient waste management, clean transportation, and green spaces. These are things that seem doable and they conform with the SDG, the Sustainable Global Development Agenda. However, the funding, the financing to get this through has remained debate. We're also looking at ecotourism and conservation. That's harnessing Africa's rich biodiversity for economic gain while preserving natural habitat. So the point is, if you are not felling the trees in the mangroves, if you are not felling the trees in the sacred groves, if you are not felling trees in the huge thick forest reserves, then something else must be done in order to bring in revenue. And ecotourism is on hand, is key. People world over would like to come and see the tropical forests that we do have and the variety of wildlife that are stocked in there. So government upon government have taken it up to develop this potential wealth creation industry. Again, the issue of finance. So in 2020, Ghana promulgated a law, that's the PPP, Public-Private Partnership Act, 1039, that seeks to bring and leverage on private capital and private technology. So we are inviting private entities to venture into these ecotourism industries alongside state institutions. And we strongly believe that if we succeed in doing that, there will be an influx of capital that can sustain economic growth whilst we preserve the environment. Having talked about the PPP, it also encourages businesses to adopt sustainable production methods through incentives and regulatory frameworks. State institutions may give some incentives if you are undertaking a project or a program that seeks to conserve and protect the environment. Then the state will be very much happy to, as it were, give some form of incentives to motivate industry to adapt to these works. So there are regulatory frameworks, and one that easily comes in mind has been the Public-Private Partnership Act. Then carbon markets and climate finance. Leveraging carbon credit systems and international funding to support low carbon industries. This has been supposedly a low-hanging fruit that on the hindsight, one may think it is, but the complexities and the uncertainties that surround the carbon credit industry or the mechanisms must be looked at critically by our development partners, the global north, because African countries do not have the capacity to go around all these seemingly simple but heavily complex systems. So it is a clarion call. It is an appeal to the industrialized countries and those who have developed the carbon credit systems to come to the level of African countries so we can all develop together along those lines. And it is a huge way of sourcing funding for economic growth. I have said that there is the need to mainstream climate financing mechanisms into the economies of various African countries. And at that level, you will be sure of having sustainable funding sources to carry out climate smart investment and ventures that will all go to help with the global agenda.
Do you have any final concluding thoughts that you would like to share?
Well, I've taken a look at the Global Strategy Nexus Africa Summit in Lagos, and I think that there are some things in there that seek to help improve the climate landscape in Africa. And I'm optimistic that the summit will provide a platform for African leaders, policymakers, businesses, and climate experts to collaborate on innovative solutions. And some of these things can be done, one, by facilitating investment, thus attract climate-conscious investors to fund green projects. Two, promote policy alignment, by encouraging African nations to develop unified climate strategies. And this will definitely include the carbon credit market systems. Then also look at fostering knowledge sharing. Information and knowledge sharing is quite key in all these things. And so the summit promises to showcase successful climate adaptation and mitigation progress from across the continent, and then comparable to what is happening in other areas, particularly Asia and South American countries. We should be comparing nose to nose if we are doing well or not, if we are lacking behind or not, if we are making progress or not. So the forum will definitely provide that kind of platform. Then my critical area of interest, that's advocacy for climate justice. Who pays for loss and damage? Climate-induced catastrophes. Who pays for? Given the unfortunate situation that insurance penetration in Africa is less than 4%. So it's quite difficult when there's flooding, which is a force majeure and destroys vast lands of farmland, destroys a lot of infrastructure and all that. Who pays for? I made a case in one of the meetings with the World Bank, and I said, look, Ghana may go in for World Bank loan of, say, $10 million to construct, say, 1 kilometer road network. Then, within 3 months, there was a heavy downpour. This newly constructed road, 1 kilometer road, is washed away by the heavy downpour, the flooding. So the inhabitants, the citizens, will be calling on the government to come and fix the road, come and rebuild the road. That is the natural thing. Nobody is thinking that that night or 2 days of washing away the road network, it is $10 million plus interest that has been washed away within a twinkle of an eye. So you can imagine that loss and damage has caused a lot of. Indeed, I happen to be the Presidential Special Envoy for Climate Vulnerable Forum. This is a forum that comprises about 58 nations coming from Africa, Asia, Caribbean, South America, and all that. And these countries have come together and they identified themselves on a common ground of having been severely hit by the climate catastrophes. So we did a calculation and we got to know that together these countries were owing, their debt portfolio was around $600 billion US. And then a calculation, the work was done on individual nations' loss and damage through climate catastrophes. And surprisingly, the cost was around $580 billion US. So you can clearly see that what has been lost over the 2 decades by these countries equals the amount of debt burdens that they carry. And so debt burdens stifles investment, it stifles spending. And so that's where it begins. The cyclical unfriendly spiral of poverty falls in there. So we are talking about advocacy for climate justice. We are talking about what happens to individuals and nations during climate induced catastrophe. Who pays for the damage? I must also inform that in Dubai, I think COP20, I've forgotten, COP24 or so, we had the opportunity to advocate for loss and damage fund. And personally, I had to engage key personalities like John Kerry of the US and other people, other key G20 officers. And it was agreed at the COP that yes, the fund will be established. As to how much is to be put in the fund and when, yes, operational remains on the books. So the advocacy must continue, and we must push for that. And it is for us, Africans, who are so much marginalized, so much hit by these climate catastrophes. Even though we are the minimal offenders, we are suffering. So we need to do something about it.
Thank you. This is incredibly informative. We look forward to hearing more of your insights at the Global Strategy Nexus next month.